welcome to another edition of the Sustainable Scoop. I am Maxwell and I have been a bird watcher for merely 1.5 years. Yet, it is still remarkable how much beauty it has brought into my life. I recently started a bird guide with my brother. This enjoyable hobby has helped me to appreciate what my interest and effort can do to help this planet. Here with me today is Dr. Ruth Bennett, who works with Bird Friendly Coffee, a division of the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thanks for inviting me.
So, can you tell us about your work?
Sure. So I am a research ecologist at the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, which is part of the Conservation Biology Institute and National Zoo. And I work with a program called Bird Friendly Coffee. We run a certification for sustainably sourced coffee that is grown organically under a shade canopy that includes diverse tree species. And we conduct science to figure out what type of habitat birds best like. And we have found that our bird-friendly coffee certification protects the best habitat possible for birds in coffee ecosystems.
It is the start of migration season in our area. Have you seen any of the birds that are migrating right now from the breeding grounds in Canada and the upper US down to Central America and South America?
Sure, great question. Yeah, so I love watching birds, especially native birds, and I live in DC. So in DC, fall migration has just recently started. We're starting to get pulses of some warblers moving south. And the best thing I saw recently was a group of about 500 common nighthawks, which are all grouping together and starting to head south.
That's pretty cool. I've never seen one of those. You are aware that there are many needs and threats that go along with migration. How is bird-friendly coffee, specifically in Peru, trying to address some of the problems native creatures and people experience on our ever-changing planet?
Great question. So we know that birds in North America have experienced sustained population declines for, at a minimum, about 40 years. A new paper came out in the journal Science recently that showed that since 1970, over 3 billion birds, individual birds, have been lost from North America. And over 90% of those birds are migratory in some capacity. So there is a major problem going on with migratory birds. Most of our migratory birds here on the East Coast migrate down to the southern US, Central America, parts of the Caribbean, and northern South America. So migration itself is a very dangerous time for birds. There's lots of things along the way that are threats to them, such as outdoor cats, wind turbines. But both in migration and on the wintering grounds in Central and South America, loss of habitat is one of the primary factors that leads to their decline. So when these birds get to Central and South America, a lot of them overwinter at the elevational band where coffee is grown. And in our research, we have over 20 years of data that shows that many migratory bird species, especially ones that are going through steep population declines, overwinter in areas where coffee is grown. And as forest and native vegetation is cleared in those coffee landscapes, there's less and less food and habitat available for those birds, which means it's unlikely for them to return back to the United States. They just won't have enough fuel to make it back here to breed next year. So by creating solutions that incentivize farmers to maintain habitat and especially native vegetation in their coffee plantations or on their coffee farms, we are ensuring that those migratory birds have food and a place to live while they're in Central and South America.
Dr. Ruth, how does bird-friendly coffee work with the Smithsonian to educate and benefit the environment, including humans?
So bird-friendly coffee is a certification and a program managed by the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian, as a primarily research institute, develops the research to figure out how birds and habitat interact. And then with the bird-friendly coffee program, we certify farms that meet a threshold of habitat for birds. So farmers that participate in our program report that they receive between 5 and 25 cents a pound more for their coffee than they would if they didn't have the certification. So what we're trying to do with our program is incentivize farmers, give them a market-based reason to conserve habitat for birds in the area that they use to grow coffee.
So why does bird-friendly coffee use shade-grown coffee versus sun-grown, and how does this help the farmer specifically?
So this is a great question. Most people don't know that coffee can be produced in a variety of different farming systems. Historically, coffee evolved as a plant in Ethiopia as an understory plant under native forest. It then was brought to the Americas, and it's widely cultivated throughout Central and South America now. And it can be grown under native forest with a completely native shade canopy. That's the best situation for native wildlife. However, coffee farmers typically produce more volume if they eliminate some of that shade to open up the canopy, let light in, and help the coffee produce more with that light. As demand for coffee has increased over the past 50 years, there is more and more incentive to remove that shade that remains, to remove those native trees that are great for birds, to produce more. So this mechanization or technification of coffee causes an increase in yields, which is great for all of us who like to drink coffee, but it causes a decrease in habitat available for native wildlife. So our certification, by giving farmers a reason and an incentive and a seal of approval to keep shade on their plantations, gives a reason for them to maintain that. Without that, the market forces are definitely incentivizing farmers to eliminate the majority or all of their shade and grow coffee in full sun monocultures that provide basically no habitat for any native wildlife.
Why is it important that we plant native trees versus non-native ones? And how does having native trees support more wildlife than invasive?
So both here in the United States and in Central and South America, the evolutionary origin of plants determines what types of insect communities are going to be associated with them and what types of bird and mammal communities will be associated. So native tree species have a long history of evolving and living with insect communities in an area. And as a tree evolves defenses against those insects, the insects also evolve ways of getting around those tree defenses. And what this leaves you with is a tree which may have many different species of insects that can eat its leaves, drink the sap from its bark, burrow into it, and those insects are food resources for birds. But a tree, say, from Australia that's introduced to Central America did not co-evolve with Central American insect communities. And so there may be one or two species of insect that are able to live on it, but very few compared with a native tree. And the same goes for our gardens here in the United States, for your backyard forest. Native plants and native trees will have more native insects, greater abundance and diversity, which leads to better benefits for wildlife.
So this brings me to my next question. How does biodiversity, supported by native trees, matter to every creature, not just birds? And how does it affect us, no matter what race, age, gender, or place that we are?
Yeah, great question. So sometimes it's hard to think about why it matters that we have 100 species of native bird in an area versus just 3 or 4. But the same conditions that support native wildlife also support us, both coffee farmers, communities that live downstream of the coffee plantations. By having more tree species and more native tree species, you typically have more birds, more mammals. You provide water filtration and water storage services that impacts the quality of life of everybody that lives around the coffee farms. You don't need to put as many agrochemicals onto the plantation to control insects because your birds and associated bat species are doing a lot of that work for you. So there's big benefits to the entire community, both human and animal and plant in that area.
So in the book Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy, he, backed up by lots of scientific research, talks about how native plants benefit our world immensely and how we humans have replaced them with introduced plants. I was wondering if you could speak to the relation to how we can change this problem and what bird-friendly coffee is doing.
Sure. So every single person on this planet has a role to play in keeping native plants on the landscape and thereby supporting native birds and other types of wildlife. So if you're somebody in the DC metro area and you drink coffee, the easiest way to do this is by looking for coffee that has the seal from the Smithsonian Bird Friendly Certified. If you see that seal, it guarantees that 100% of the coffee in that bag came from an organic coffee farm that had at least 40% shade cover with at least 11 different species of native tree. So you have consumer confidence that you're supporting birds and other habitat and downstream resources for farmers in the area by buying that. But also decisions you take here in your backyards and in your communities can also benefit native plants and native animals. So if you have a lawn, choosing to put in some native flowers instead of just grass is a great way to increase the biodiversity value of your backyard.
How can we change ourselves, change our monoculture mentality, for instance, with lawns and single crop farms, into a native habitat it used to be?
This is a complicated question. Sometimes it's easier to not think about managing lots of different types of flowering shrubs in your backyard, or not thinking about where your coffee comes from or where your foods come from. But we as consumers, we as people that drink coffee, are the reason that farmers are incentivized to chop down forest to grow more coffee. And so it's the responsibility of every person to think critically about how we're spending our money and what the impact of those decisions are. So by choosing to spend your money on coffee that's grown from shaded plantations that are organically produced, you are actually incentivizing the maintenance and retention of the migratory birds that live here in the summer and live in those coffee plantations in the winter.
That's really incredible. So Bird Friendly Coffee is a global organization, but we also know the importance of acting locally. So we are going to go to Robyn Puffenbarger, a VA Master Gardener, environmentalist, and teacher. She has a very busy schedule, so we are lucky to hear her opinions on the ways Bird Friendly Coffee is contributing to solving these problems. Welcome, Dr. Robyn. I was wondering, with your knowledge as a VA Master Gardener, what you think about what Bird Friendly Coffee is doing.
Well, I am really happy to know that you can go to the grocery store and see that certification on your coffee bags, so that you know a couple of things: that the coffee is being grown sustainably. It's often shade grown. That means there's habitat and ecosystem services for our birds that have to spend a good bit of their lives. You know, a lot of the birds we love here in North America, you know, are leaving right now, leaving for Central and South America, where they're going to winter. And it's just as important for us to have habitat here for them to breed as it is there for them to overwinter safely. And I think the other thing that's so great about that certification is knowing that the farmers are getting to have a sustainable livelihood. They are also economically sustained by that certification.
So how do you think we can take inspiration from what they are doing and apply it to our buying decisions, conversations, thought process, and the way we live our lives?
Well, one of the things I've heard about that maybe isn't quite as far along in the system of certifying shade-grown coffee, the bird-friendly coffee, is the kind of same idea for chocolate. So the base product of chocolate is also grown in the tropics, and it's easier and faster to grow it if you do some more invasive techniques. But if we could get to the point where we have, you know, bird-friendly, shade-grown, sustainably harvested chocolate, I think that would be a really great thing. I mean, I like my coffee and my chocolate, so I would like to know that my buying choices are supporting the ecosystems and the farmers in Central and South America for both of those products, chocolate and coffee.
Well, thank you for all the insight you have provided. If there's any way someone can contact you, how would they do so?
Well, I'm a faculty member at Bridgewater College, and so it would be rpuffenb@bridgewater.edu, or you could go to the Bridgewater College webpage and just look for me, I'd be happy to chat with anybody about their ideas of sustainability and gardening in general.
It's been great having you here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Dr. Robyn, so much for sharing your views on bird-friendly coffee and how we can learn from the uniquely great work that they do. I know that many young people will be interested in this topic, not just for the good of our future selves, but also for maintaining the balance that nature provides. How can young advocates change rules in a world in which we are treated as minor citizens?
I think there's a role for every person to play in this process, but especially for young advocates that are interested in sustainable food systems, that are interested in eating in a way that supports the planet. There's a lot of different things you can do. One is to educate yourself about why it's good to retain native tree species or set aside areas next to the area where food is grown. The second thing you can do is reach out to your local coffee roasters, your local grocery stores, and if you don't find bird-friendly certified coffee there, ask them why not. A lot of coffee roasters we work with tell us that people don't want bird-friendly coffee. No one's asking for it, no one knows it exists. And so if young advocates who like to drink coffee or at least hang out in coffee shops go and ask their coffee shops why they don't have that, that gives those businesses a reason to reach out to us and start to source those products. So those are two really simple things to do. And then finally, if you're really interested in this topic, you can write to us at birdfriendly@si.edu or search for Bird Friendly Coffee on the Smithsonian's website, contact us directly, and perhaps come and do an internship with us, work for us for a summer, and learn a lot more and contribute to our program.
I want to thank you, Dr. Ruth, for all of the great answers, advice, and knowledge you've given. I know that you have inspired great change, and I'm sure that the viewers watching will be grateful for the time you took to be with us.
Thanks very much, Maxwell. Thanks for thinking of me and inviting me to be on this program. And I hope you keep up the great work inspiring people to make more sustainable decisions.
For all of you viewers out there that want to know more about this topic and are inspired by what was said, you can check out the description for links to Doug Tallamay's books, my website, and a website that will help you plant native plants and more. That's it for this edition of the Sustainable Scoop. I'm Maxwell, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.